Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. There's an old agricultural rhythm that most of us have lost touch with, even though it still shapes a good deal of biblical wisdom about money and work. A farmer in the ancient Near East didn't build a house and then figure out how to pay for it. He cleared ground, turned the soil, planted seed, and waded through long stretches where nothing visible was happening at all. Only once the land was actually yielding something dependable did he put stone on stone for a dwelling. The house came after the harvest, not before it. That sequence is the whole idea behind Proverbs 24 verse 27, which instructs the reader to put outdoor work in order and get the fields ready before building the house. It's a short verse, easy to read past, but it captures something that modern financial life tends to invert without anyone quite noticing. Most households today build in the opposite order. The mortgage comes first, often before any real income-producing asset exists at all. Then come the car payments, the credit lines, the furniture financed over 12 interest-free months. All of it is aimed at comfort and consumption, and very little of it is aimed at production. This isn't because people are careless or foolish. It's because almost nothing in the ordinary financial world nudges a person toward building a field. Lenders profit when people finance a house, a car, or a vacation. They earn nothing while someone spends 2 quiet years developing a skill, starting a small side business, or building a rental property. So the visible machinery of credit points toward the house, gently and respectably, while the field goes untended. Over enough years, an entire culture normalizes this order simply because everyone around them is doing the same thing. The consequences show up in fairly stark numbers. Surveys on household finances in the United States have repeatedly found that a large share of adults would struggle to cover even a modest unexpected expense without borrowing or selling something. At the very same time, the typical mortgaged household carries a debt balance well into 6 figures. A great deal of house, and very little cushion underneath it. That gap isn't a moral failing. It's the predictable result of building in reverse. Investing heavily in the thing that costs money every month while neglecting the thing that could have been generating money all along. Solomon, who is traditionally credited with writing Proverbs, wasn't offering a narrow farming tip when he wrote that verse. He was describing an order of operations that applies far beyond literal agriculture. The field, in this reading, is symbolic. It stands for whatever produces income on an ongoing basis. A trade, a skill sharpened over years, a small business, a rental unit, anything that keeps generating value whether or not a person is actively present to it every single day. The house, by contrast, stands for lifestyle and consumption, the upgraded kitchen, the newer car, the larger square footage, the improvements that make daily life more comfortable but don't themselves produce anything. Solomon's point isn't that houses are bad or that comfort is sinful. It's that a house needs something underneath it to sustain it, and building the house before the field exists leaves a family standing on nothing but a paycheck and a hope that the paycheck never stops. This idea shows up more than once in the wisdom literature, which suggests it wasn't an incidental thought. Proverbs 12 verse 11 makes a related point: the one who works the land will have plenty of bread, while the one chasing empty pursuits lacks sense. There's a contrast built into that verse between steady, unglamorous labor on something real and the scattered energy of chasing whatever looks exciting at the moment. A person tending an actual field, even slowly and without much fanfare, ends up fed. A person hopping between shiny opportunities, never staying with one long enough to see it mature, tends to end up with very little to show for the effort. Proverbs 14 verse 23 adds another layer. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Planning matters, and so does understanding, but at some point a person has to move from discussing an idea to doing the work that makes it real. No amount of reading, listening to counsel, or thinking through a strategy substitutes for the actual labor of establishing something that produces. Put together, these verses describe a sequence rather than a single command. Prepare the ground, do the steady work of tending it, and only once it's actually yielding something reliable, build on top of it. It's worth sitting with why the order matters so much, rather than treating it as an arbitrary rule. A house built before the field exists depends entirely on outside income continuing without interruption, a job that doesn't end, a paycheck that doesn't shrink, an employer that doesn't restructure. There's nothing wrong with having a job, but a household with no other source of income has no margin if that single source falters. A house built after the field is established has something to fall back on. If the paycheck stops, the field is still there, still producing. That's the practical difference between an owner and what might be called a permanent tenant of one's own life, someone who has a nice house but no ground of their own actually generating anything underneath it. Applying this in an ordinary life today, without any grand agricultural metaphor attached, tends to come down to a few concrete steps. The first is identifying an actual field, something specific, not an abstract wish to make more money. That could be a skill someone already has but has never monetized, an ability with numbers that could become bookkeeping work, a talent for teaching that could become tutoring, a knack for a craft that could become a small side business. It could be an asset already owned that's sitting idle, extra space, a vehicle, tools, that could be put to productive use instead of simply depreciating. The field is rarely dramatic. It's usually something quiet and already present in a person's life, waiting to be treated as more than a hobby. The second step, and the one that goes against instinct, is resisting the urge to spend new income on the house immediately. When people find an extra stream of money, the natural impulse is to treat it as proof of success and reward themselves right away, new furniture, a nicer car, some visible sign that the effort worked. Proverbs 24 verse 27 argues for the opposite instinct. Let the field actually establish itself first. For some stretch of time, whatever the new income produces should go back into strengthening the field itself. Better tools, further training, a small reserve that keeps the effort from collapsing at the first difficulty, rather than into upgrading daily life. This is the least glamorous part of the whole sequence, and probably the reason so many people skip it. It requires tolerating a season where extra effort doesn't yet translate into extra comfort, trusting that the payoff comes later and more solidly if the field is given time to mature. The third step follows naturally from the first two. Once the field is producing consistently, its income, not the regular paycheck and not new borrowing, becomes what pays for improvements to the house. This is where the reversal finally completes itself. The renovation, the debt payoff, the upgrade, gets funded by something the household built and owns outright, rather than by another promise to a lender. The house is still allowed to grow. Nothing about this order requires permanent austerity or treats comfort as inherently wrong. The question the whole passage is really asking is simply which money gets to build the house, borrowed money that has to be repaid over decades regardless of what happens to income, or earned money from an asset that belongs to the household free and clear. None of this is a guarantee, and it would be dishonest to present it as one. Fields fail sometimes. A skill someone tries to monetize might not find enough demand. A small business might not survive its first year. A rental property might come with unexpected costs. The wisdom in going slowly, starting small, and keeping the primary paycheck intact while the field gets established is precisely that a setback in the field, while a person still has other income, costs a lesson rather than the loss of a home. Attempting the field first and the house only afterward isn't a promise of certain success, it's a structure that keeps failure survivable instead of catastrophic. It's also worth being honest about why this order isn't taught more widely. Financial literacy surveys consistently show that a large share of adults would rate their own understanding of personal finance as weak. That's not really surprising, because most of what gets marketed to households is designed around financing consumption, not production. Nobody selling a mortgage or a car loan has much incentive to first ask whether a household has an income-producing asset in place. That's not a conspiracy in any dramatic sense. It's simply the shape of an industry built around one kind of transaction rather than another. Recognizing that shape doesn't require assigning blame to any particular institution, it just means understanding that the default path most people are nudged toward isn't necessarily the wisest one, and that building differently takes a degree of deliberate effort most people were never taught to make. There's something worth noting, too, about how this principle treats time. A field takes seasons to become productive: plowing, planting, tending, waiting, harvesting. There's no shortcut through that process, and the ancient audience for this proverb would have understood that intuitively in a way that's easy to forget in a culture accustomed to instant results. Whatever the modern equivalent of a field looks like, a trade, a craft, a small enterprise, it's unlikely to become reliably productive overnight. Expecting it to, and giving up when it doesn't, is its own version of skipping the plowing and planting stage. Patience isn't incidental to the principle, it's built into the very metaphor of a field, which by nature can't be rushed. None of this suggests guilt over homes already built in the reverse order, which describes most households, since almost everyone was handed a system oriented around financing the house first and was never taught this particular sequence. The more useful response than regret is simply beginning now, in whatever modest way is actually available. Naming one real field, giving it time to establish before treating its income as a reward to spend, and eventually letting what it produces, rather than another loan, be what funds the next improvement to the home. Done patiently and repeated season after season, that reversal is what turns a household from something resting entirely on borrowed ground into something standing, finally, on soil that actually belongs to it.